Hey everybody, Eve here. Today's video is going to be about why you shouldn't buy a tiny house. That's right. Even though it may be the right choice, there are certain things you have to know before you purchase one. And that's what we're going to be getting into today. Yes, living tiny does have its advantages. Definite financial, emotional, and physical advantages. But there's also tons of disadvantages to living tiny, space being one of them. It's going to be very difficult living in a tiny space if you plan on having a family. Bear in mind that most tiny homes are under 960 square feet. In fact, most of them average under 200 square feet. So 200 square feet is challenging even for one person, let alone two. And then imagine trying to add an infant to that equation. Trust me, the smells alone would make that totally undesirable. So one of the biggest reasons for considering not going tiny or buying a tiny house is if you plan on having a family. And that's just the beginning. Another reason not to buy a tiny house is because of zoning boards and zoning laws. Because most zoning boards and zoning laws require for you to build a minimum space of 960 square feet. And of course, it depends on the state that you build in, because these zoning laws vary from state to state and even county to county. So before you even consider purchasing a tiny house, you need to know the zoning laws of that state. And I've even heard horror stories of people purchasing land in very isolated and way out in the boondocks types of areas, only to find out 4 to 6 months later, they've got a code authority sticker, zoning board code authority sticker on their window or the door telling them that it's illegal and they have to get out. So that's a nightmare in and of itself. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons you need to watch this video before you purchase a tiny house or decide to go tiny. Another reason not to buy or build a tiny house until you watch this video is because of the building itself. If you don't know what you're doing, and it's the first time you've ever built a tiny home and you don't have any knowledge or previous experience, there's a lot you need to know about insulation. It's got to be on wheels. You've got to make sure that the house itself is not too heavy for the trailer that's going to be mounted on. I mean, trust me, there's tons of things that need to be considered when building a tiny house. And even professional builders can make mistakes. I mean, they have to be properly insulated, and I've heard of tiny homes that after they were built, around where the window seals are and what have you, people having leakage problems and condensation problems and septic problems, and there's just tons of things that can go wrong with a tiny house build, even if it's done by a professional builder. So take these things into consideration prior to building a tiny house or a tiny living space of any kind. Do your research, do your homework. Yes, I want you to live tiny. I live tiny. But do your research. And there's lots of reasons to watch this video before you go tiny so that you don't make the mistakes, costly mistakes, that will make you live to regret it. A lot of people who build tiny homes end up, because of zoning laws, moving way out in the country. And unfortunately, they'll be so far away from groceries, shopping, hospitals, doctors, family and friends that the isolation becomes unbearable. And believe me, even though living tiny and living in a tiny house can be one of the most fulfilling experiences that you will ever have, financially freeing, everything in a nutshell, all that in a bag of chips, you're going to be isolated. You're going to feel isolated. You're going to get cabin fever. You're going to go stir crazy from time to time if you're way out in some remote location. So bear in mind, yes, it's nice to live tiny. It's nice to live in the country, but make sure that I would rather park in somebody's yard or on someone else's property and be within 5 minutes of shopping and family and friends, because that's going to be more comfortable long term. So bear that in mind. You know, you may have to park that tiny house in a place that isn't yours, and you're maybe not going to be able to obtain that fabulous piece of property because of zoning problems and other things like that. So just take that in consideration. It needs to be considered. Well, that's it for today. I wanted to keep this video brief. And yeah, I'm not trying to pee on your parade of buying a tiny house or living tiny. That wasn't my intention. Just want you to consider some of the things, the biggest pitfalls to living tiny or building a tiny house that you can circumvent by watching this video. So in the future, I'm going to offer my tiny living and tiny house recommendations. So while you're here, please thumbs up, comment on, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And while you're subscribing to my YouTube channel, be sure to ring that little notification bell so you'll be notified to my future video uploads. And in the meantime, may Christ bless each and every one of you most abundantly. And yeah, don't buy that tiny house until you watch this video.